Giuseppe Garibaldi. Giuseppe Garibaldi, July 4, 1807, June 2, 1882, was an Italian patriot and soldier of the Risorgimento. He personally led many of the military campaigns that brought about the formation of a unified Italy. He was called the hero of the two worlds, in tribute to his military expeditions in South America and Europe. The role he played in encouraging Italian nationalism and in unifying the Italian kingdoms and duchies into a single nation-state can be compared to that of Otto von Bismarck in Germany. Early activity: South American adventures, return to Italy and second exile, campaign of 1860, aftermath, expedition against Rome, final struggle with Austria, and other adventures. Writings. Legacy. Nationalism was on the rise in Europe. Towards the end of Garibaldi's life, nationalism was rife in the Balkans as Ottoman imperial power declined in that region. Nation-states were conceived as linguistically and culturally homogeneous entities, whose people told a common story about their origins, and who were usually also united by a dominant religious tradition. Although some Italian city-states had prospered, Italy had not acquired an overseas empire like other European countries had. Garibaldi left Italy well placed to do so. She finally joined in the scramble for empire in 1870, when she acquired a foothold in Eritrea, which became an Italian colony in 1890, later also invading and colonizing the area that became Libya. Garibaldi transformed Italy from a loose confederation of independent states to a modern nation-state, one that would emerge as a major economic power in the late 20th century as a member of the G8, whose members represent 65% of the world economy, founded in 1975 as the G6. However, Garibaldi may also have paved the way for the later emergence of Benito Mussolini, the dictator who allied Italy with Adolf Hitler during World War II, since, although united, Italy remained fractious and ripe for a strong leader to exert centralized control. Early activity. Garibaldi was born in 1807, in the former Italian city of Nizza, called Nice in French and English and Nizza in Italian, taken under French control in 1792. Garibaldi's family was involved in coastal trade, and he was reared to a life on the sea. He was certified in 1832, as a merchant marine captain. A very influential day in Garibaldi's life came during a visit to Taganrog, Russia, in April 1833, where he moored for 10 days with the schooner Clorinda and a shipment of oranges. In a seaport inn, he met Giovanni Battista Cuneo from Oneglia, a political immigrant from Italy and member of the secret movement, Young Italy, La Giovine Italia. Garibaldi joined the society, and took an oath of dedicating his life to struggle for liberation of his homeland from Austrian dominance. In Geneva, in November 1833, Garibaldi met Giuseppe Mazzini, an impassioned proponent of Italian unification as a liberal republic through political and social reforms. He joined the Young Italy movement and the Carbonari Revolutionary Association. In February 1834, he participated in a failed Mazzinian insurrection in Piedmont, was sentenced to death in absentia by a Genoese court, and fled to Marseille. The exile sailed first to Tunisia, eventually finding his way to Brazil, where he encountered Ana Maria Ribeiro de Silva, Anita, a woman of Portuguese and Indian descent, who became his lover, companion in arms, and wife. With other Italian exiles and Republicans, he fought on behalf of the separatists of the Rio Grande do Sul and the Uruguayans who opposed the Argentinian dictator, Juan Manuel de Rosas. Calling on the Italians of Montevideo, Garibaldi formed the Italian Legion in 1843, whose black flag represented Italy in mourning while the volcano at its center symbolized the dormant power in their homeland. It was in Uruguay that the Legion first sported the red shirts, obtained from a factory in Montevideo which had intended to export them to the slaughterhouses of Argentina. It was to become the symbol of Garibaldi and his followers. The formation of his force of volunteers, his mastery of the techniques of guerrilla warfare, his opposition to Brazilian and Argentinian imperialism, and his victories in the battles of Ferro and Sant Antonio in 1846, not only assured the freedom of Uruguay, but made him and his followers heroes in Italy and Europe. The fate of his homeland, however, continued to concern Garibaldi. The election of Giovanni Mastai-Ferretti as Pope Pius IX in 1846, led many to believe he was the liberal pope prophesied by Gioberti, who would provide the leadership for the unification of Italy. From his exile, Mazzini applauded the first reforms of Pio Nono. In 1847, Garibaldi offered the apostolic nuncio at Rio de Janeiro Bedini the service of his Italian legion for the liberation of the peninsula. News of the outbreak of revolution in Palermo in January 1848, and revolutionary agitation elsewhere in Italy, encouraged Garibaldi to lead some 60 members of his legion home. South American adventures. After Tunisia, Garibaldi left for Brazil and took up the cause of independence of the Republic of Rio Grande do Sul, the former Brazilian province of São Pedro do Rio Grande do Sul, joining the gaucho rebels known as the Farrapos, Tatars, against the newly independent Brazilian nation, War of Tatars. During this war, he encountered Anita Ribeiro when the Tatar army tried to proclaim another republic in the Brazilian province of Santa Catarina. In October 1839, Anita left her husband, Manuel Duarte Aguiar, to join Garibaldi on his ship, the Rio Pardo. A month later, she fought at her lover's side at the battles of Imbituba and Laguna. In 1841, the couple moved to Montevideo, Uruguay, where Garibaldi worked as a trader and schoolmaster, and married there the following year. They had 4 children: Menotti, born 1840, Rosita, born 1843, Teresita, born 1845, and Ricciotti, born 1847. Anita was carrying their 5th child when she died, 1849. A skilled horsewoman, she is said to have taught Giuseppe about the gaucho culture of southern Brazil and Uruguay. In 1842, Garibaldi took command of the Uruguayan fleet and raised an Italian legion for that country's war, Guerra Grande, with the Argentine dictator, Juan Manuel de Rosas. Between 1842 and 1848, Garibaldi defended Montevideo against Argentinian forces led by former Uruguayan dictator Manuel Uribe. The election of Pope Pius IX in 1846 had caused a sensation among Italian patriots, both at home and in exile. When news of the Pope's initial reforms reached Montevideo, Garibaldi wrote the following letter. "If these hands, used to fighting, would be acceptable to His Holiness, we most thankfully dedicate them to the service of him who deserves so well of the Church and of the fatherland. Joyful indeed shall we and our companions in whose name we speak be, if we may be allowed to shed our blood in defense of Pio Nono's work of redemption." October 12, 1847. Return to Italy and second exile. Garibaldi returned to Italy amongst the turmoils of the revolutions of 1848, and offered his services to Charles Albert of Sardinia. The monarch displayed some liberal inclinations, but treated Garibaldi with coolness and distrust. Rebuffed by the Piedmontese, he and his followers crossed into Lombardy, where they offered assistance to the provisional government of Milan. Meanwhile, a Roman Republic had been proclaimed in the Papal States, but a French force sent by Louis Napoleon, the future Napoleon III, threatened to topple it. At Mazzini's urging, Garibaldi took up the command of the defense of Rome. His wife, Anita, fought with him. Despite their effort, the city fell on June 30, 1849, and Garibaldi was forced to flee to the north, hunted by Austrian, French, Spanish, and Neapolitan troops. Anita died near Ravenna during the retreat. The Americas. Garibaldi eventually managed to escape abroad. In 1850, he became a resident of New York, where he met Antonio Meucci. For some time, he worked as a candlemaker on Staten Island. Afterwards he made several voyages to the Pacific, during which he visited Andean revolutionary heroine Manuela Sáenz in Peru. Tyneside. On March 21, 1854, Garibaldi sailed into the mouth of the River Tyne in northeastern England, as master of the sailing vessel, Commonwealth. The ship had sailed from Baltimore and was flying the American flag when it docked and unloaded its cargo in South Shields. Garibaldi, already a popular figure on Tyneside, was welcomed enthusiastically by the local working class, although the Newcastle Courant reported that he refused an invitation to dine with dignitaries in nearby Newcastle. As a memento of his stay in the area, an inscribed sword, paid for through public subscriptions, was presented to Garibaldi. His grandson carried the sword to South Africa with him almost half a century later, when he volunteered to fight for the British Army in the Boer War. In total, Garibaldi stayed in Tyneside for over a month, departing at the end of April 1854. Austro-Piedmontese War. Garibaldi returned again to Italy in 1854. In 1859, The Austro-Piedmontese War, also known as the Austro-Sardinian War, broke out in the midst of internal plots of the Sardinian government. Garibaldi was appointed Major General, and formed a volunteer unit named the Hunters of the Alps. With his volunteers, he won victories over the Austrians at Varese, Como, and other places. One outcome of the war, though, left Garibaldi very displeased. His home city of Nice was surrendered to the French, in return for crucial military assistance. Campaign of 1860. At the beginning of April 1860, uprisings in Messina and Palermo in the absolutist kingdom of the Two Sicilies provided Garibaldi with an opportunity. He gathered about 1,000 volunteers, called I Mila, or, as popularly known, the Red Shirts, in 2 ships, and landed at Marsala, on the westernmost point of Sicily, on May 11. Swelling the ranks of his army with scattered bands of local rebels, Garibaldi defeated a 3,000-strong Bourbon French garrison at Calatafimi on May 13. The next day, he declared himself dictator of Sicily in the name of Victor Emmanuel II of Italy. He advanced then to Palermo, the capital of the island, and launched a siege on May 27. He had the support of many of the inhabitants, who rose up against the garrison, but before the city could be taken, reinforcements arrived and bombarded the city nearly to ruins. At this time, a British admiral intervened and facilitated an armistice, by which the Neapolitan royal troops and warships surrendered the city and departed. Garibaldi had won a signal victory. He gained worldwide renown and the adulation of Italians. Faith in his prowess was so strong that doubt, confusion, and dismay seized even the Neapolitan court. 6 weeks later, he marched against Messina in the east of the island. By the end of July, only the citadel resisted. Having finished the conquest of Sicily, he crossed the Strait of Messina, under the nose of the Neapolitan fleet, and marched northward. Garibaldi's progress was met with more celebration than resistance, and on September 7, he entered the capital city of Naples. However, he had never defeated the Bourbon king, Francis II. Most of the Sicilian army remained loyal, and had gathered north of the river Volturno. Though by then Garibaldi's volunteers numbered some 25,000, they could not oppose the Sicilians. The volunteers had some success on the October 1, but Francis II retired only the next day, after the arrival of the Sardinian army under the command of Victor Emmanuel. Aftermath. Garibaldi deeply disliked the Sardinian Prime Minister, Camillo di Cavour. To an extent, he simply mistrusted Cavour's pragmatism and realpolitik, but he also bore a personal grudge for trading away his home city of Nice to the French the previous year. On the other hand, he felt attracted toward the Sardinian monarch, who in his opinion had been chosen by Providence for the liberation of Italy. In his famous meeting with Victor Emmanuel II at Teano on October 26, 1860, Garibaldi greeted him as King of Italy and shook his hand. He resigned the next day. Garibaldi rode into Naples at the king's side on November 7, then retired to the rocky island of Caprera, refusing to accept any reward for his services. On October 5, Garibaldi set up the International Legion, bringing together different national divisions of French, Poles, Swiss, German, and other nationalities, with a view not just of finishing the liberation of Italy, but also of their homelands. With the motto, "Free from the Alps to the Adriatic," the unification movement set its gaze on Rome and Venice. Mazzini was discontented with the perpetuation of monarchical government, and continued to agitate for a republic. Garibaldi, frustrated at inaction by the king, and bristling over perceived snubs, organized a new venture. This time, he intended to take on the Papal States. At the outbreak of the American Civil War, in 1861, Garibaldi volunteered his services to President Abraham Lincoln and was invited to serve as a Major General in the Union Army. Garibaldi then reconsidered, saying that he would only serve on 2 conditions: 1, that slavery would definitely be abolished, and 2, that he would be given full command of the army. Both these conditions were impossible for Lincoln to accept, and so the offer was quietly withdrawn. Expedition against Rome. A challenge against the Pope's temporal domain was viewed with great distrust by Catholics around the world, and the French Emperor Napoleon III had guaranteed the independence of Rome from Italy by stationing a French garrison in Rome. Victor Emmanuel was wary of the international repercussions of attacking the Papal States, and discouraged his subjects from participating in revolutionary ventures with such intentions. Nonetheless, Garibaldi believed he had the secret support of his government. In June of 1862, he sailed from Genoa and landed at Palermo, seeking to gather volunteers for the impending campaign under the slogan Roma o Mort, Rome or Death. An enthusiastic party quickly joined him, and he turned for Messina, hoping to cross to the mainland there. A. Werner, Autobiography of Giuseppe Garibaldi, New York, Howard Fertig, 1971. The history of earlier contributions by Wikipedians is accessible to researchers here.